Hey, hello, hello. Right, let's make a start on this. Um, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at kind of questions and considerations for um, birth, labour and birth, and we had quite a lot of questions, and it was really useful to kind of think about your perspective on this as well. And I've got a few questions that people have sent in advance for today as well. And what I want to talk through tonight is just the fourth trimester. And that's just those early days and weeks with your new baby as a new parent, as you are just finding your feet, working out kind of what your baby needs, what you need, what's to be expected. And what I find about this, I see a lot of parents within this time, and I get a lot of messages from people within this time. And I think part of the issue with that is that uh, expectations perhaps aren't that real, and I think that can come from a place where there's an awful lot of there's certainly social media, but there's books have been around forever about kind of routines, about settling your babies, about getting them to sleep, about a bit them being away from you and off you. And the reality is that for a lot of babies, they just need to be held quite close. And it's about having that close to you. And the thing about the fourth trimester is that it's a real time where it's unpredictable, really, and every baby's got their own personality, and their needs just vary, differ so much. And I think it's that can really knock the confidence of parents, whether this is your first baby or second, third, fourth. I can go and see people who are on their third baby and they're just like, oh, we haven't had one like this before. Um, the personality of this one, the needs of this one are just slightly different. And I think the fourth trimester, if you're pregnant and preparing for that period, or if you're in that period right now, is to think about how are you with kind of just that unpredictability and what it is that you need, because it can feel a bit chaotic. And you're also healing as well, and you're also kind of recovering from pregnancy, from labor, from birth. You're adjusting, you're feeding, you're having to make decisions and navigating new territory, even if this isn't your first baby. So these are questions I always ask, and it's about, when you think about life with your new baby, what does that look like? And th- I ask this because I think it's useful to um, think about kind of where the challenges might be, what the fears might be, and actually if it's realistic. I absolutely remember, and my daughter's going to be 24 this year. But I absolutely remember thinking that babies slept, and well, she'll just sleep a lot because that's what they do. And my naivety was that I would possibly swaddle, and this Moses basket that we'd bought, that this baby would just go in there, and oh God, I might actually be bored. I had no clue that she would actually, for the first 3 months of her life, would want to just be held and be on my chest, be close to me all the time, to feed, for reassurance, at night for sleep. And, I guess that's one of the reasons why training in postnatal work was really important to me, because it taught me that our expectations aren't always based on reality, and some babies are really quite needy. So I would go along and meet up with the mums I'd met on my NCT class, and they had babies that you could just pop on a pillow, and I'd be like, well, what am I doing wrong? So and I know I'm not alone in that, and I've worked with lots of women and lots of babies who are exactly like that, and eventually they stop being like that. But you've kind of got to give that to them. So as part of kind of the work I have done for birth preparation, but with kind of new parents as well, I kind of want to pose some questions for consideration, really, to think about, how do you feel about looking after a new baby? And that can be the root of kind of maybe what support you need, especially if you're thinking about what could be helpful for you in those few weeks, maybe from a practical perspective, because that's maybe about what support you might need for if you have a partner, what you might need from kind of family, from friends. What will your baby need as well? Because having some understanding of that and considering that might help you have realistic expectations about what it is that your baby will need from you in those early weeks. And actually, what babies often need is kind of just reassurance, calm, safety, security, and not a lot else. And it's about being led by them. And all new babies are so different, and for some new babies they are quite chilled and they are quite settled, and to take nothing away from any other parents, but so many parents would say, God, it's nothing I've done, they've just been able to settle. And some babies can't do that, and they have to learn how to do that, and it takes a while. So that can come as a shock to adjust to that, and you kind of think, God, this is never going to end. And that kind of feeds into what could make a difference to your baby. And some of the conversations I have with new parents who are feeling kind of overwhelmed and a bit stressed, and they then have an unsettled baby, is maybe if we can work at the root of that stress, and you can be maybe a bit calmer and just a bit more accepting of where your baby's at and what your baby needs, that could be the difference. Because what can happen is that you end up battling with your baby to kind of maybe to sleep more, to sleep away from you, to get into a routine with feeds, and your baby just might not be capable of that yet, and that is to come weeks and maybe even months for some babies down the road. And that battling just you end up feeling quite stressed and feeling like you're just getting it all wrong, and you're not. These babies have really simple basic biological needs, but the wider forum of information doesn't really talk about that, because it doesn't really sell any books. And I've talked about this a long time. Every now and again I get people going, God, write a book. And I think, well, what would I say, really? Babies need you to be chilled, try and work with it, accept it, and eventually they do calm down, and some sleep, some don't. And what are the concerns about life with a new baby? That varies a lot as well, especially if this isn't your first baby. And it can be about, well, how much, if you're concerned, actually some of the questions I've got today are, I'm worried about coping with the lack of sleep. How will I know what to do? I'm anxious about keeping my baby safe. And I messaged this person back to say, kind of, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, just, I've got to keep this creature alive. How? I don't know what I'm doing. So those are really common concerns, and getting it wrong is a really common issue. And over the years with doing kind of antenatal classes, the comments are always based around the fact that it's about not having the answers, and that can feel really important when you have a baby, to kind of feel like I need to have some answers. And my big philosophy around babies is that they're not a problem to be solved. They just need a bit of time. And we just need to calm and have patience with them. So what could be unhelpful is possibly having unrealistic expectations about what your baby's capable of, but also unrealistic expectations about what you can achieve as well. Because one of the things that, again, really common comments that I get is, well, how will I get anything done? I can't get anything done because I need to do this, and I need to be doing things. And we can come at parenting with the attitude of, I've got to do things. And certainly for this period, for the fourth trimester, maybe it's just about being and not always doing. So giving yourself a chance to sit and rest and feed your baby, and maybe just let your baby sleep on you so that you can rest. And I appreciate these things aren't as easy if this isn't your first baby, because you have to meet the needs of your other children. But it's reflecting and assessing and where you can make that happen and what support you need. And one of the things that people can be concerned about when it's not your first baby is, my first baby fed for 45 minutes at a time was really hard to settle. How do I do that if I have a toddler? And the truth is, yeah, your second baby could be identical, or they could be much more efficient at feeding and just a bit calmer, and they might be really happy in a sling so that you can meet the needs of your toddler, preschooler, and they're happy to kind of just go along for the ride. But all of this is a period of adjustment, just to allow you to adapt. And so don't rush. I like the term fourth trimester because it suggests 3 months, and I think it can take that long to kind of really find your feet with a new baby. So thinking about what could make a difference to you, so that you've maybe got the support, and so that you're not juggling too much in those early days. And the reason why I've posed these questions is so that you can personalize this for yourself, because I just don't think there's one right answer and one right solution to you as a parent for how you adjust to this period. I talk about this a lot with new parents. How do you feel about resting and taking it easy? Because again, it's that thing of, oh, I've got to be doing. And I'll have conversations with people about, well, I felt really well after I've given birth. I had more energy than I thought. I felt better than I thought. So I've just, and kind of lists off these nice things, lovely things, but they're like flying around all over the place. And I just think there's maybe a place for resting for those few weeks afterwards, to give you chance to heal. If you're breastfeeding, chance for kind of that to happen, for your milk to come in, for that to kind of become established with your baby, and also for you and your baby to get to know each other. But one of the reasons for putting this question in is that the amount of women I've worked with who then have commented, I wish I'd taken it easier. That's the one regret that often comes up is, oh, I wish I could have, I'd rested more when I had the chance. Because I think there might be a period where any partners are on leave. So you might be busy doing nice stuff for some of that. and then you're kind of exhausted by the time they go back. Or it's just like healing feels like it's taking a while. Or for some mums, they will comment that there's just this realization that life gets busy, and it's with retrospect, and we can all look back in hindsight, but with retrospect thinking, oh, I had a chance to kind of just be. I wish I'd done it. So it's, I think it's a problem we have with looking lazy, and you're not being lazy. You are feeding a baby and giving the baby all the reassurance that they need. So sit on the sofa under a sleeping baby, and prioritizing it, I think, is a really important strategy. So to go back to those questions, as you prepare or as you're living it, it's maybe thinking about where that support comes from so that you can rest. Because one of the things that again comes up in conversations is this rest and having help might not happen unless you plan for it. And this goes beyond those early weeks as well, kind of where you've got developmental leaps and growth spurts and things where you're particularly tired, or if sleep kind of is challenging and you're kind of not getting the rest that you need, having a chance to recharge and look after yourself is really important. So again, thinking about what do you need to make that rest happen? How does that work realistically within your support network? So, for some parents, it's they can call on family and friends to help. For others, it's working out with partners, when can they step in? Or it can just be a case of, you go to bed really early and just heading up at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. And again, it's another challenge, because then people can say, oh, I really haven't got an evening. You will get that. This isn't forever. But if you're exhausted and there's a period where you can get some sleep, prioritize that, and then eventually you can tweak that and you can adjust and you can reflect on what your needs are. But if it's about you getting a bit more sleep and being able to function and feel better, that's got to be helpful. How do you feel about being able to settle? And I think that kind of kicks in with some of the questions I've got to do, like how will I know what to do? I haven't met a parent yet that feels that they don't know how to do it, really, because your natural response is to want to pick them up and to soothe them. What gets in the way of that, I feel sometimes, is feeling that that's wrong. And that can be because of comments from people, or because of maybe something that you've read, that feeling of kind of that can't be right, because babies are meant to self-soothe or learn how to self-soothe and to be kind of a bit more independent. And what we know from the evidence is that, and just experience, is that, the more we invest in them at this stage, the more able to be independent and to be settled that they are as they get older. But right now, at this point, when they're brand new, if they need the cuddles, that's what you give them. However, what I did discover, and it's about following the lead of your baby as well, what I did discover with my second baby was that actually she also needed a bit of space. She didn't want to be as cuddled all the time, and was quite happy to be kind of popped down. And that was a kind of a learning curve for me, because I'd felt like my first one wanted so many cuddles all the time. So my instinct was like, oh, well, I'll do that. And then I just wasn't quite listening to her. She did still want that, I would say 95% of the time. But there was the odd moment where she was just like, get off me, mother. put me down, please. Um, and that's what it's about. You just tweak things. There are no right answers all the time. So with a new baby, it's about, do they want a cuddle? Do they want a food to feed? Do they want winding? Do they want to go to somebody else? Actually, are you stressed? If you're carrying all of that, that's why sometimes handing them over to somebody else, if they're a bit unsettled, does make a difference. And how do you feel about taking life at a slower pace? Because baby days are very different from perhaps days of feeling like you're achieving at work. Baby days are about maybe not getting dressed until ever, actually, some days, but till later in the day. Or it is about just maybe managing to have one warm cup of tea. But it's about what this picture shows. It's about, babies being on you and you meeting their needs and just having that much gentler pace of life. And that can take a while to adjust to. And depending on your baby's needs and just how shattered you are, sometimes you've just got to go with that and not. Again, it's about not battling with that, because you just end up being really tired. And if your baby needs you to sit, maybe that's what you do. Being at the centre of your care are questions that I start with birth preparation, so that you can think about what it is that you need. And I guess my reason for putting this question together is about meeting your baby's needs and maybe having to step up if you felt that something wasn't quite right. So maybe if feeding didn't seem quite right, or if you were concerned about how unsettled your baby is, because sometimes there are things like tongue ties that are there could be reflux, there could be things that are just underlying your baby's unsettledness, and you might need to kind of have those conversations with midwives and health visitors. And when it comes to things like tongue ties, if you're wanting to breastfeed, the sooner that can be diagnosed and dealt with, the better. But the system that we have in this country is a bit hit and miss with that, because there used to be lots of more clinics. There used to be a lot more NHS support. Now there's a lot of private support which you can access, but it can be about raising this quite early on to see if there's somewhere that your midwife can refer you to, because some clinics will have a cut-off date of when baby's a few weeks old. They won't do it beyond that. It's about funding and it's about the availability of staff. So I guess the reason for this question is to think about, if you feel that something's not right, or that you just need more reassurance or more information about something, and if you do have a particularly unsettled baby, that maybe there is something underlying that, babies can have issues with milk protein, for instance, and that can kind of mean that they're just presenting as having reflux, but just something's not quite right and they won't settle. Babies should settle at some point. So, and it's about going with your gut with that. So sometimes you might have to really speak up, and that's not easy for everybody. And I'm really aware of that. And I've been challenged by that in the past, where I have ran antenatal classes, and some people are like, well, I'm just not a confident person, or I'm not that assertive. How do I do it? And what I've learned to say to that is, does does it make a difference to your assertiveness if you think about you're protecting the needs or representing the needs of your baby, rather than if it's hard to do it for you? And that can be a real challenge. So I've spoken to some people who have been like, yeah, I would feel really challenged by speaking up for me. I don't want to cause a fuss, but if this is representing the needs of your baby, maybe that's easier to do. Or you go to an appointment with somebody, maybe your partner, you go together, or with a family member, or somebody who can help support you, or kind of help to advocate for you as well. And this question came about from my work as a doula, because I think there's something about your preparation for, you come home with this baby and you're like, oh, right, okay, where is everything? And so it's kind of getting things ready. And when you go in the end of pregnancy and you're going into labour, unless you're having a planned cesarean, there is an unpredictability of kind of what your labour is going to be like and what your needs are going to be when you come home. So I think there's a place for having things in your house set up for your baby, so that maybe it's not just in one space. So I remember doing some baby prep sessions with a couple who the idea was that everything was going to be in the nursery, which was up 2 flights of stairs. And so I said, that's great, yes, absolutely, have that done. However, let's think about having a box of items on the middle floor, which is where their bedroom was, and downstairs, which is where the living room and the kitchen was, so that you've got stuff to hand should you need it. And you won't need it forever, but just initially, while you're just finding your feet, while you're recovering, you don't really know what those needs are going to be to start with. Maybe it's just worth having things for baby, kind of nappies and all that stuff, but also things for you. So, you might be ravenous, you might be very thirsty. So bottles of water and just snacks everywhere, really. One of my clients had snacks in the bathroom, and she said that was absolute perfection. So yeah, you really could be ravenous. So, and you could be in a situation where you're kind of under a baby, and feeding, baby's settling, you don't want to move anywhere, so having a box of something that you can just get something out of, and when you settle down to feed, however you're feeding, making sure that you've got things like your phone, maybe TV remote, a drink, food to hand, so that if baby's asleep and you might be there for a bit, you can get comfortable and you just don't have to go anywhere. If you get a chance to have a wee beforehand as well, so that you are more settled. And if you know you're having a cesarean, this is a bit easier. But if you do have a cesarean and maybe going up and down the stairs is a bit of an issue to begin with, then maybe it's about just nesting in your bedroom, hopefully near a bathroom to begin with, so that you're not necessarily up and down the stairs initially. What I haven't put on here, actually, which I should, is there's a theory around the period of rest after you've had a baby. So it goes something along the lines of kind of 5 days kind of in bed, really. So basically you're not doing anything apart from resting and looking after your baby, and then 5 days kind of on the bed, so you're maybe kind of dressed and you're pottering a bit more around the house. And then after that, the final 5 days, so between 10 and 15 days, you're kind of maybe hovering, or you're sofa based. So it's just about focusing around rest. And it's not to say that, you can't leave the house, and it's that it's really kind of prescriptive and restricted. But it's just an idea to think about for those first couple of weeks after you've had a baby, thinking about absolutely prioritizing rest so that you're not doing the other stuff. Because especially if you have other children, yes, you've obviously got to see them, cuddle them, chat to them, spend time with them. But let's not be ideally picking up all the chores and doing the washing or the cooking or any of that. If that can go to somebody else, the vast majority of it, let's let that go so that you can focus on just being with your family and resting. And I've been challenged on that before, because some women have said, well, I'm perfectly capable, I can do that, all of this. And it's not about that. It's, well, from my perspective anyway, and it's about just prioritizing rest when you might need it most, and going with what your needs are, rather than just being worn out right at the beginning when your body's trying to do all of that healing. And I think, what could help you boost your confidence with your baby, thinking about what it is that you might need, really, because there's no easy answer to this. Because confidence probably has to come with experience, and that's probably about just spending time together. And it is a learning curve, and it does take a while. So, maybe the confidence comes from just expecting that as a reality, and not necessarily rushing it. And a lot of the comments from some of the new mums I've worked with is about, it's not my job to give permission, but because I'm a practitioner, I am able to kind of go, just rest and try and relax and just be and spend the days, take it day by day, as you meet the needs of your baby and work it out and focus on kind of what you're good at in this time. And it doesn't come straight away. You might not feel confident straight away. Again, that might depend on whether this is your first baby or second or third. I certainly wasn't challenged by as much second time round, and that's quite a common comment from people when they're not having their first baby, because I think that the phases end and it kind of moves on to something. It's never final. The babies are constantly changing. Whereas I think when it's first time round, you don't know that they are always adapting and changing, and that their needs always shift. Again, it's about those expectations about life with a baby. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to talk through, maybe next week, talk through the slides about kind of basically how a baby works, what they need, how they function, what their behavior is. So that can help to develop realistic expectations around how able they are to settle. And they're quite vulnerable, and I love this picture because that's the cutest baby, but the reality is often so different from what we expect, and that takes a while to adjust to that as well. And I think new parents, when it's your first baby especially, you don't expect the level of connection and how much they need to cling to you and how much they want to be with you. And that can feel really challenging. And I recently worked with a family who were massively challenged by it, because these were people that were professional people who were used to achieving and accomplishing, and then to have this beautiful little baby who they absolutely adored. But the reality was that they were used to being in control of their day, and with this brand new baby, that went out the window a bit. So actually, I've had a question today about routines and about, like, how do you get your baby into a routine? And I'm not a huge supporter of routines, mainly because I feel like they come if you get to know your baby and you can respond to their cues, and then you can develop a loose routine based around what their needs are. But I just feel like babies are so ever changing that routines are quite difficult, and you've just got to go with the flow. Now that's just my perspective on it, but it is built on being around lots of babies and lots of parents. And I kind of feel that the babies who you can get into a routine are probably just those really chilled babies that they'll just be like, yeah, whatever, I'll do whatever, I'm fine. Because they don't have intense needs, they're quite chilled. But it's the babies who are more demanding that you often want a routine for, because that's a source of control. So sometimes when I've worked with parents about where this need for a routine comes from, it's about they feel helpless and just out of kilter, and just the lack of control is unsettling for them. So my job is to help them work through that scenario, because they're just challenged by this new world of chaos that a new baby brings with it. So the whole thing of routines, I think there is a place for them, but that comes as they get a little bit older. And routines always have to be flexible, because a baby's need just changes, dependent on their environment, their growth spurts, their development leaps, just whatever their brain, just if their brain's in a particular state, that's going to need a certain thing. So, but what is important throughout all of this thread is to just have that support and reassurance, really, so that you don't feel vulnerable with this. Because again, that's another side of this, is that you can feel like you're the only one getting this wrong, and everybody else in the world with a baby knows what they're doing and is getting this right. And that, I can tell you absolutely now, they're not. And even if it looks like that, that could be somebody having a good day, and later on or the next day they're going to be scrabbling around for answers as well, because that's having a baby, and nobody ever has the answers, and we're all making it up every single day. And we have to do things that feel right for us and our family that somebody else wouldn't want to do, and that's okay. Because you find what works. But the crucial thing is to go with what works for your baby. Again, it's easing that battling. So as an example, is I have worked with people who have wanted babies to have kind of a daytime nap routine. Fine. But if that means them being in the nursery, and then that's impacting if you're going out, if that all works and you're happy and your baby's happy, absolutely, happy days, that's great. But if your baby's battling with it, therefore you're battling with your baby to make it work, or if your baby's kind of quite happy to have a nap at that time, but you're missing out on a class or meeting up with other mums or other adults for conversation, actually that's impacting your mood, then that's not good enough reason to do it, maybe. And maybe then it's about, well, actually, if your baby might have a nap wherever they are, so what's the important factor? And your well-being would be. So there's not one thing that fits every family. So it is finding what matters and what's important for you. You know, anxiety can really creep in, even if it's never bothered you before. So some days that can just be what's there. If you can't settle your baby, maybe you might feel a bit anxious or just overwhelmed by it. Try and use your breathing if you can, just to slow everything down so that you can breathe in and then as you breathe out, just let your shoulders go, loosen your jaw, uncurl your fingers, and just do that 2 or 3 times so that then you can just slow your heart rate down. And then you can think about what it is that you need, because that can be really important to think about. I'm overwhelmed. What am I overwhelmed about? What do I need? And then you can build on that to think about what support do you need. And it might just be that you need some information about baby development, to understand that what you're experiencing with your baby is completely normal, is not a problem at all, and let's just see what support you need to manage these challenges, rather than just feeling like you're struggling. So here's a checklist that I put together for those early days and weeks with your baby. So to think about, do you need support and reassurance? What is it that you need? What would be helpful? What would be useful for you? Trying not to compare is a big one, but it's worth pointing out because, as I've already mentioned, it's really easy to think, well, that baby does that, and well, that mum looks like she's got it together. And actually, the reality is that that's just that baby on that day, and they're all different. So try not to compare and just focusing on the needs of both you and your baby at that point makes a difference. Keeping your days simple perhaps is helpful, so that you're not doing too much, not rushing around or trying to fit too much in. Focusing on getting to know your baby so that you're spending time with them, and then you could read their cues and kind of you get to know their little pattern and what their needs are within a day, because it definitely comes. And I've loved seeing the development of parents going from feeling a bit lost and like rabbit in headlights at the beginning to then having just much more confidence in knowing what their baby needs. But that might take a few weeks to get to know your baby. And linked in with keeping your day simple is kind of not overscheduling. So maybe not doing too many classes, and just giving yourself a bit of space to have a quiet day if you've had a bad night and you're just tired. Talk to people, most definitely. Drink plenty of water. Try and eat well. Have snacks on you at all times. Plan in rest. Talked about this a lot. It's a real foundation for your recovery and for just coping with lack of sleep and just this adjustment period. Just get out, even if you're having a day where you're kind of predominantly wanting to be around the house. If you've got a garden, maybe just have a wander there, just walk around the block, just change a scene. Bit of fresh air might make a difference. It can really impact your mood a little bit as well. You don't have to go far. And try and let your instincts kick in as well. If something feels like it's not right, whether that's for you or for your baby, talk to somebody about it. Or if you just feel like you need reassurance about something. So it's not that anything's wrong, it's just actually I just feel like I just need to know what's going on with this and that this is normal. Reach out, which, you know, segues beautifully into the last point. Ask for and accept some help. That could be practical help around the house. That could be helping with other children. You know, there's a real thing about not wanting to look like you can't do it, or not wanting to feel like a failure, or that you can't do everything. We're not meant to do everything. So if you can have some help, and if that stops you from struggling, then let's do that. You might have people around you who will just proactively offer and do things. But if it's a case of you have to ask for it, maybe that's what you need to do. There we go. And that's the end of me. So I am available for one-to-one sessions, which I do in person if you're near me in Tyneside, but mainly online. So I work with people from all over the country. There is the newsletter, which you can sign up for, and I also work with organisations to support people kind of before they go off on maternity leave and when they're back from maternity leave as well. So, I don't know, mention me to your HR department, could be handy. So, what I'm aiming to do is every week just having these sessions where I can talk through some slides, I can answer your questions, and we can just have a bit of a conversation about what your questions are, and just answering your questions, and just getting you in a position where you feel that you can prepare, plan, and just manage any challenges, and just have like an understanding that underpins, the knowledge of how birth works, how babies work, and therefore what you need. So I will see you again next week, and I will upload this onto Substack now so you can watch it in your own time. Take care, and I will see you soon.